What is up, everyone? Brandon First, aka First Report, representing the First Off the Bench podcast network. Everyone comes off the bench. We are first. It is time for the NFL Weekly, Week 10 to be exact, as we get you ready for the weekend ahead in the NFL. And of course, when I say we, I mean myself and my friend and co-host Raider Jim Martinez. You can find Mr. Martinez at Raider Jim 1090. How you doing tonight, sir?
No, I'm almost adjusted to this time change thing, and here we are. I usually have my big grin on my face, talking about it's cooling down in San Diego, only 80 degrees. Well, folks, it's finally here. It really is cooling down in the 40s when I let my doggies out in the morning, and Raider Jim just doesn't do temperatures like that. So, serves me right for being such a smart guy all the time.
Yeah, I think I checked my phone 3 or 4 times on my way to work on Monday just to make sure I wasn't late because I'm not used to having to need my sunglasses at 6 in the morning. But yeah, it's definitely a little different. Even just looking out my window at 4:45, it's essentially dark. It's time to get the cat inside, that type of stuff. But yeah, it's another daylight savings. I don't know how long it's going to last. I don't know. Everyone keeps saying that it got voted down or this or that. Well, it is still here, at least for this year. But it is also kind of symbolic, or at least for me, just because, when the time change, now we're going to now football, it's really kind of hitting that high gear as we get closer and closer, of course, to Thanksgiving. And then, the playoffs right around the corner, looking ahead to January. Still another somewhat crazy week. Plenty of storylines in week number 9. Raider Jim, some of your thoughts from week 9.
Well, I'm not going to get too crazy with the whole Raider Nation thing, even though I'm the card-carrying lifer on that front. But at the same time, I'm glad for what they did. But let's just see what really happens. We still have a lot of football left to play before everybody starts thinking they're going to make this great run and make it back to the playoffs. Other things I saw in week 9, boy, the Rams, they're really in a state far from the guys that were just, in charge and in control of the NFC West. That doesn't seem to be the case anymore. San Francisco still has a little bit of an uphill climb that they have to make, but we'll see what happens this week because they're going to be going up against Jacksonville, which quite honestly I don't think is going to be an easy game, especially on the road like that. Atlanta Falcons can't close. That's the bottom line to them, and they're in a world of hurt. The Chicago Bears, it was a great Cinderella story when they put that kid out there against the Raiders, but he was out there against the Raiders. And since then, I think he's thrown 5 interceptions. They need Justin Fields back in the worst way. Buffalo, wow, what do you say about Buffalo? They just can't put points on the board in the last quarter. They're having some real second half issues there, and they need to get over that. It seemed to me, what the parts of it I saw, they were in striking distance when I'm on the scoreboard, that is, against Cincinnati, and they just could not persevere. But speaking of Cincinnati, looks like Mr. Burrow is back, and they're really going to make a run here. But the guys that everybody better watch out for, and they seem to be one of the 2 teams to really watch and beat, and that is Baltimore and Philadelphia. Both of those are my top 2 teams right now in the NFL, and fun to watch, that's for sure.
Yeah, Baltimore looked downright scary, taking care of business against a pretty good Detroit team. And what can you say? They went out and they executed their game plan. They won the way they know how. I think it's going to be a great race in the NFC North. I mean, the AFC North, it's wide open, but I mean, even Pittsburgh, you can make the jokes all you want about this and that, but they're 5-3, 7-2 Baltimore, and then Cincinnati's starting to catch up, and you have Cleveland, whose defense is on a historic pace. That AFC North is going to be very, very interesting. The 3 things that obviously jumped out to me, first and foremost, I thought it was a classic in Philadelphia. I don't give a whole lot of props very often to the Cowboys and Dak Prescott, but look, I know he's getting a lot of flack for him stepping out on that 2-point conversion. And yeah, things would have probably been a lot different had he not done that. But in that situation, goodness, like it's not a Dan Orlovsky running out of the back of the end zone type thing. And like I said, I don't want to sit here and pick up the baton for Dak Prescott and the Cowboys, but I thought they played very well. But at the end of the day, the Eagles do what they have done, and they found a way to win, and they got the job done. They're moving off to 8-1 as they head into the bye, a 2.5-game lead heading into the bye in that division, plus 2 games, at least in the loss column, against anyone else in the NFC. So the Eagles are looking pretty good, at least overall. Definitely have some things to figure out, but you have the bye week coming up. 2 quarterback performances really stood out to me. First and foremost, CJ Stroud, he has arrived. I texted you. I said, wow, this kid's a menace. And I'm going to kick myself because he was sitting on my bench in fantasy. I lost by 0.8 points because Justin Herbert couldn't get me 8 points. But you know what? It's okay. Those things happen. If you're going to play fantasy, you're going to have weeks like that. You can't really second guess yourself. Hindsight's 2020. But if I would have lost because CJ Stroud only put up 8 points and Justin Herbert put up 50, everyone looked at me like I'm an idiot. So nothing really could do there. But CJ Stroud, what a performance. And if you're a Carolina Panther fan, look away because that is a very unfortunate situation that you're having to deal with. And finally, what more can be said about Joshua Dobbs? And I think I've referred to him as Josh Dobbs, but apparently he likes to go by Joshua. So Joshua Dobbs, they were practicing his cadence on the sideline in that game before he entered the game. First 2 drives, it looked like this is not going to work. But he figured it out. I mean, the stories coming out of this, essentially, they're not even really calling plays to him. They're telling him, okay, call this play. And then they're telling him what the play is. He didn't take any reps with the first team offense, and he goes out and wins the game. Hats off to Joshua Dobbs. And this is a kid also that I didn't know this till this week. He's a literal rocket scientist. He's probably got a job lined up at NASA when this football thing is all said and done. So I don't know. I just thought that was really one of the better stories that we've seen in football. Hats off. I was very impressed with him, what he did in Arizona. Look, I don't think he's a Super Bowl. I don't think he's a franchise quarterback. But I don't think anybody works as hard and tries as hard as this guy. And he has something that I think a lot of quarterbacks need. It's that selective memory. I've never believed when they say, oh, you make a mistake, forget all about it. No, you figure out what doesn't matter, forget about that. But pick up on some things, learn from that mistake. You can't forget about it totally. And I think Josh Dobbs, like I said, his first 2 drives, it looked like, this isn't going to go well. And it was almost like he just kind of had the blinders on and said, look, the ball's in my hand. I'm going to do everything I can to get my team down the field. Hats off to him. And I think the Vikings, they're in a division that is somewhat up for grabs. We'll see how the Lions do this weekend as they come out west. But the Vikings are kind of one of those teams that you kind of want to root for. And I know Kirk Cousins is pulling real hard for Joshua Dobbs and his boys there. Also, Justin Jefferson has been cleared to practice. I think he has now a 3-week window to return. I don't think they're not on my list, but I don't think he will be playing this week or probably even next week, but he is at least on the right track. So,
going back to real quick on Joshua Dobbs, you and I always say you can't help but look at a guy like Lamar Jackson, people like that have this great physical ability. But I'll tell you what, give me a guy that's got physical ability, but you take that rocket science mentality, that brain, boy, that's a very coachable, teachable guy, and he's going to be able to figure things out. He's definitely somebody you want. Maybe not your starter week in and week out, but if you want somebody who can go in and play as he did the other day, that's going to be a positive for you.
Totally agree. Could not say any more good things about what Joshua Dobbs has done. And it won't change no matter what happens the rest of the year. Maybe he kind of struggles going forward. Still very, very gutsy performance. And Very, very impressed for someone I was already very impressed with what
Right.
he was doing in Arizona. It's not like he came out of nowhere. Incredible stuff. But it is time to look ahead to week 10. 4 teams on buys this week. You have Kansas City and Miami as they kind of wear off the jet lag that they had as they went to Germany. And then you have the Los Angeles Rams and the Philadelphia Eagles. I don't know why I put Kansas City on here twice, but it's the Philadelphia Eagles who also have a bye. One bit of Rams news. Former Eagles quarterback Carson Wentz has been signed. So, anyways, I'll leave that one there. The jokes can write themselves. I'll let the internet have fun with that. They already
Look,
are.
that's a third team in 3 years. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah.
And it's been, look, we got a first round pick for him. That's all I'm gonna say. The contract that we signed him up to, definitely hindsight didn't look good, but look, what Carson Wentz was doing the Super Bowl season, I was very, very impressed with. Ironically, it was actually in Los Angeles where he tore his ACL, and that kind of, essentially ended his Eagles career. He played for a bit the next year, but Jalen Hurts eventually stepped in and took the reins. But with that being said, time to look ahead. And as always, we are going to start with the Thursday night matchup. Folks, if you're looking for good standalone games this weekend, I don't think this is the week for you. But with that being said, we have a matchup of the Carolina Panthers at the Chicago Bears. This, of course, will be Thursday night football. The Bears are 3.5-point favorites. The over-under is 38.5. One interesting note here, this is a kind of double win for the Bears, because if they do win, they actually improve their draft stock because they have Carolina's first round pick going back to that trade that brought Bryce Young to Carolina in the draft. So something to keep an eye or think about there. But Raider Jim, I'll give you the honors to get us started. Carolina heads to Chicago.
Yeah, surprisingly, before I get right into this particular game, checking the weather for the whole calendar, there's really nobody, and I'm so surprised it's going to be under any real threat from the elements. Chicago is going to be maybe a little bit of rain, but just cold. It's going to be cool by the time they hit kickoff in Chicago, but it should be fairly dry, fairly manageable, and of course, they're in Chicago, so it is going to be a bit windy. Now, Carolina is an absolute abomination. Let's just be honest. 1-7, they got the one win the week that I picked against them, if you will. I know there's no way they're going to win this one, and of course they went out and won that one. But Carolina going in against Chicago, Chicago's defense isn't big on sacking people. They've only got, I think, 10 sacks out of 9 games so far, but they're going to come in this week. They have a good chance to correct that. They did a pretty good job when they played against the Raiders, who were just maybe this much better than Carolina. So watch for Chicago to rattle the quarterback. They're going to go ahead. I think they very easily covered the 3 points. So give me Chicago -3. Might still take 2.5 on that one just to play it safe. As far as the over-under, I've been watching the lines from Vegas Insider, FanDuel, and a couple others. So now we can go under 40 on this one, and you'll be good with any of your books that you want to play.
Love under 40. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
I think we are going to stay under that. For me, kind of what I've adopted over the last few weeks in these, let's just call it like it is, these toilet bowl games. If you are going to bet it, for me, the way I look at it is just take the points. And I think Chicago, we are not going to see Justin Fields, or at least it doesn't sound like it. There was some kind of double talk from Matt Eberflus in a press conference. It was kind of funny. CBS Sports put a little montage together. He started off by saying he's doubtful, and then he said, well, no, he's not going to play tomorrow. And then another person said, well, is he out or is he doubtful? He said, well, he's listed as doubtful. And then another person asked, he goes, well, he's not going to play. And it was kind of like one of those things like, do you understand why 4 people have asked the same question? But anyways, it doesn't seem like Josh Fields is going to play. Tyson Badgett the one thing I will say about last week, the turnovers were obviously an issue, and it seemed like New Orleans, it was like a cat playing with a dead mouse or a semi-dead mouse. It didn't want to eat it. It didn't want to destroy it. Just wanted to play with it for a little while. I mean, 5 turnovers, and I think they were one of the first teams in quite some time to win the turnover differential by 4 or more and not cover. So I think Chicago got into a point where they were just having to chuck it up the field. And look, with a rookie undrafted quarterback, interceptions are going to come. I just think Carolina in this one, I'm definitely not watching it. Probably not going to bet it, but gun to my head, I just got to take the points. Give me Carolina plus 3.5. But I really do like under. I liked under 38.5. So I really like under 40.
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to see a ton of points being scored. I mean, 20-17 was where I put the ceiling. And I think that's what we could get there. And 20-17 either way gives me plus 3.5 for Carolina. So we shall see. Watch this game at your own peril. But with that being said, time to switch to Sunday night football. And this is another tough one. But I know Raider Jim will be tuned in, locked into this one. It is the Jets. They are heading to Vegas as 1.5-point favorites over the Raiders. This is, of course, on Sunday Night Football, and the over-under sits at 36. Nobody gets the first word on a Raider game on this podcast besides Raider Jim. So, Mr. Martinez, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I'm not even going to come close to saying that the Raider offense can compete with the Chargers offense at this time. Defensively, the Raiders have played actually a little bit better ball than I've expected them to play the last few weeks. They got over 20 points. That was a fantastic thing. Actually tipped the needle over at 30. So that was a very positive sign. If they can continue that, I'm trying to figure out how at home they are a 1.5-point dog, especially. Did anybody see how well the Jets did not play on Monday night? And, boggles the mind, but there's always going to be those head-scratching games out there. I think the Raider defense is going to keep the Raiders in this game as well. I think they're going to have another successful offensive performance. I think they're going to get better output than they had those first 7-8 weeks of the season. Josh Jacobs almost got 100 yards, and I think he might be able to duplicate that effort again this week. Offensive line, everybody, I think, on the Raiders side of the ball is just a little bit more motivated with the change and the changes that they have made throughout the organization at the higher levels. So on this one, at the 1.5-point spread, give me the Raiders on the money line, and I think we'll go over 36 because I can see the Raiders putting up 4 touchdowns on this one, and I can see the Jets getting at least 10-17.
Yeah, I like you. I like the Raiders money line here. Full disclosure, I actually didn't see the score of the Raider game until about an hour after the game, just because when I was watching the Eagles Cowboys, I don't get a whole lot of opportunities to watch my team in full, so I was just fully focused on that, and I saw the score. Wow. But I also do think that was more a reflection of the Giants in that one, but I do like the Raiders to get the job done here. The one thing I really like for the Raiders defense versus the Jets offense, which is absolutely offensive, is the 2 best players for the Raiders. I would say in no particular order because they're very different, but you have Daniel Carlson, the kicker, and Max Crosby, obviously the defensive end, the edge rusher. Look, Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa had their way with that offensive line. Max Crosby is going to get after the quarterback. At the very least, someone else on the defensive line is going to have single coverage and should be able to get through to this offensive line. I think the Raiders get the job done. I do like the under here. The reason I brought up Daniel Carlson, I see this as a game that you're watching kind of in the background, and somehow, some way you look up and it's 14-14 with 10 seconds to go, and you go, gosh, how have we gotten here? And how have these 2 teams scored points? And Daniel Carlson comes out, kicks a field goal, and the Raiders win 17-14, which, that's a 31. So give me the under. I've been very, very impressed with the Jets defense. The Jets defense was so good last week. It made Zach Wilson look even worse. Zach Wilson was not good. However, you have to take into account the offensive line that was protecting him. The Jets offensive line might be one of the worst in football, might be the worst in football. And when you have that bad, when you're that bad on one side of the ball and you're so good on the other, it kind of boggles my mind. But I'll tell you this right now. The Ravens with Trent Dilfer won a Super Bowl with once again Trent Dilfer and a defense that I honestly do think the Jets are at least around or in that league. I think this defense is so good. Obviously, they were good enough to beat the Eagles. So I do think we stay under here. But I think at the end of the day, the Raiders do get the win. Now, I have a question for you, Raider Jim, before we move on to the next one, because I've always said NFL purgatory is 7 to 9 wins not making the playoffs, because A, you're not making the playoffs, and B, you're picking between 12 and 18 in the draft. If the Raiders win this game, they'll be 5-5. And you want to talk about playoffs, you can, but I guess my question to you is, at some point, do you kind of just go, it might be best for us to, fold up the tent and see what we can get in the top 10?
I don't think that's going to be the case with the Raiders. I think they're going to be too hell-bent on making the biggest statement they can. They owe a lot to the fan base, and when they finally started making the moves last week, then that told me that maybe they really are starting to look at it globally. We got to do it for the fan base, of course, but we got to do it for these guys that we're putting into uniforms, and they don't want to now make it look in any way, shape, or form that they are going to coast, put it neutral, and just be happy, getting a good position in the draft. So no, I think they're just going to go for it.
Gotcha. And hats off as well to Antonio Pierce and his staff. At the very least, he had those guys ready to roll. I saw a cool little thing that he was the first coach maybe ever, or at least in recent memory, to have the practice squad guys essentially on the sideline. I thought that was pretty cool.
And they have made a lot of moves with the practice squad, which you don't, that's usually just kind of behind the scenes. It's filler stuff on any of the tabloids or the papers or the news agent, newsreels that you read. But they actually were making a lot of noise on the practice squad. So to even go out and want to boost the level of your practice squad, okay, we'll wait and see. But at first look, it looks like they're making the right efforts.
Definitely. And unfortunately for Antonio Pierce, though, he is an interim coach. So no matter what he does, he will be fired. See Rich Bisaccia. But anyways, with that being said, moving on to staying on the West Coast, I should say, it's going to be the Detroit Lions. They are heading to SoFi Stadium. They will face the Los Angeles Chargers. The Lions currently are 2.5-point favorites, and the over-under sits at 49. Raider Jim, what are your thoughts? Lions head to SoFi.
Yeah, the Lions, to me, they're almost like that thief in the night. They're very quiet. They're very stealth. And who knew until you sat down and looked at the standings? These guys are 6-2. They're playing some good football. They're going into LA. It's going to be, there's a chance, I guess, that it could be raining by that time next week. I don't know to what level. And I don't know how much that would really impact this game. But Detroit coming in as the 3-point favorite, and I know what that means for you, and I know what it means for me. We're going to take that half point. We're going to take Detroit at 2.5. But I think the Detroit offense is going to be very, very successful against the Chargers, and I think their defense is going to do enough to slow up Mr. Herbert and friends. But still, Chargers have played a fantastic game last week. They looked pretty darn good, but the point total right now, I've got under 49. I can't, my computer doesn't want to cooperate today, so I'm not able to. Let's see, I've got 48.5 at the CBS over under. So, for me to see it go under 49, I will take that. I can see this being a 27-24 type of a game, or maybe a 24-21 type of a game.
Yeah, I was very impressed with the Chargers defense, but once again, kind of, going back to the Raiders Giants, that was probably more of a reflection of the Jets offense than the Chargers defense. I think the Chargers offense kind of takes a breath, and the Lions defense is pretty darn good, but it is not the level of the Jets. I think Justin Herbert looks at his stat line. I think he was like 16 of 33 for like 145 yards. Obviously, no touchdowns. And I think he wants to kind of get back into it and kind of get back into the norm. Because look, there are going to be talks about whether or not his finger's okay or this or that. You know, you are in a big market, even though there's not a ton of fans there, you're still in a big market. So I do like the over here. I think both of these teams are going to score some points. We're going to see, and I don't want to go as far as say a shootout, but I could see a 31-24 victory for the Lions. I think the Lions get the job done. With all due respect to the SoFi Stadium and the Chargers fan base, it's not really a home field advantage. It's probably going to be 50-50. Plenty of Lions fans out here in California and Southern California. So give me the Lions, -2.5, like you said. You know what I'm going to do. So I just think the Lions get the job done at the very least. I think they win by a field goal. And I think the Lions keep rolling, especially considering now they were in a division where they were like, 10 wins will probably win us this division by 3 games. And then they saw the Vikings come out and they go, okay, well, maybe we got to, maybe keep it in third gear. I mean, you don't need to upshift yet, but just keep it there. And I think they do that. And also, too, I don't think Dan Campbell's going to let these guys forget about what happened last week. They got their butts kicked by Baltimore. And I think they want to kind of come out and get everyone focused on the Lions, Dan Campbell's Lions, as opposed to some people who are going, same old Lions. They're not going to get the job done. But moving on to Monday Night Football, it is another interesting one. That's the best thing I could say about this one. Denver is heading to Buffalo. The Bills are going to be 8-point favorites in this one, and the over-under sits at 46.5. Raider Jim, what are your thoughts? Denver heads to Buffalo.
Yeah, again, surprisingly, weather's not going to be a factor in this game. Just cold, very, very cold, which shouldn't matter to either team, quite honestly. Denver their offense is going to struggle against the Buffalo defense. Now, the Buffalo offense really has to be able to play 4 quarters. They can't just get to the 4th quarter and not score. They have to be very disappointed at the outcome of last week's game. They've got to put more points on the board, and what better opponent to have than the Denver Broncos to make that statement. I'm not going to even touch the spread on this one. 7.5. It's one of those. It's gotten to be too much for me this season to look at the big numbers and talk about big numbers when you get to the next game.
I was just going to say.
Right. 7.5 is peanuts compared to what we're going to talk about next. But the over-under is 47, and I'm going to go under on this because I really don't see Denver scoring too much this game.
Yeah, it's going to be I really do wish there was some weather in this one. I'm fiending for a snow game.
Nice.
Yeah, something. I mean, it is November, and it's easy for me to say I'm sitting here. It was 75, 80 degrees and beautiful today, so it's easy for me to be like, I just want to see other people sit in the snow. But I don't know. I felt like this would be one of those games. It would be kind of I go back to I think it was the Patriots and the Jets or something, and it was like 35-mile-an-hour winds. The game was just terrible, but it was kind of like an experience, if you will. These two teams definitely experience themselves. I am going to go Denver plus 8.5. And one of the main reasons, so I'm just going to buy that, get me to 8.5. One of the main reasons is Buffalo has been so up and down this season. I don't like to kind of put 8 points on a team I'm not fully bought in on. And also, look, at the end of the day, Denver, they did what needed to be done to beat Kansas City. Excuse me. So that's not my whole thing, and I don't think Denver is going to win this game, but I think Denver can keep this game close. And I think Sean Payton is, at the very least, I don't want to say righted the ship, but at the very least, they're not taking on water at the moment. They may still be kind of slowly sinking, but it's not coming in. They patched the holes. They're starting to kind of bail the water out now. So give me Denver 8.5. Not terribly confident about this one. And with that happening, it's kind of the reverse of what you were thinking. The only way Denver can cover this, they're going to have to at least get into the teens, maybe into the 20s. So I could see this a 28-21. So at that point, I am going to take the over. But that might just be hopeful thinking because I'm just, like I said, I'm looking at these Thursday night, Sunday night, and Monday night football games, and I might just, catch up on some light reading or something like that, because some of these games are a little much to have to kind of put yourself through. This one's definitely the most intriguing of the three, with all due respect to the other two, just because at the very least it is Russell Wilson versus Josh Allen. 5 years ago that would have been, well, maybe not for Josh Allen, but 5 years ago Russell Wilson, that would have been great. So who knows? Maybe he can kind of get things going. And to be fair, Russell Wilson hasn't had a bad season. It just hasn't been the Russell that we've kind of fallen or gotten to know, if you will. So yeah, and Raider Jim kind of alluded to this one. Oof. It's an NFC East battle. We think we expect the Giants to show up at least in uniform, but it is going to be the New York Giants. Oh, they're heading to Dallas to face the Cowboys. By far the biggest spread I think we've talked about this year. It is the Cowboys as 15.5-point favorites, and the over-under sits at 37.5. And the reason I laugh is because we're talking about a spread of 15.5, but an over-under of 37.5. So just thinking about that on gambling terms, you in any other situation, you would go, wait, what? In this situation, you go, oh, okay, I get it. I'll take this one just because it is the NFC East. Look, I always try to stay away from big spreads, but I think you have the Giants, who are going to be starting, I almost called him Danny, Tony DeVito. And I believe he becomes now an NFL record 10th different rookie starting quarterback. We're only 10 weeks into the season. We've already set a record for the most rookie quarterback starting. And to be honest, I didn't think it was a very good quarterback class to begin with. But anyways, so it will be Tony DeVito going up against this Dallas defense that is just, like I always say, they're looking to punch somebody. And unfortunately, they have a very punchable opponent in the Giants. We saw what they did week 1 at the Meadowlands, where it seemed like you blinked and they were down 28-0. So, gun to my head, I guess I'll take Dallas 15.5. I'm not touching this spread with Raider Jim's wallet, let alone my own. But I will take the over here because I do think at the very least, I could see the Cowboys putting up 38 points themselves. Through turnovers and just, like I said, the abilities for these guys to just want to kind of get back on track. I somehow can see Dallas doing all the heavy lifting in this over-under themselves. But Raider Jim, what are your thoughts? Giants at Dallas. Uh-oh. Did you freeze? Oh, yes. All right. So it does look like we lost Raider Jim. He should be popping back in here any moment. Yeah, it's just a technical issue on his side. So just kind of hold up here for a moment. But yeah, just going a little deeper into this Giants-Dallas game. Obviously, the Giants are going to try to get some sort of Saquon Barkley going. The hard part with that, with the Cowboys, and really with any NFL defense, when you become so one-dimensional, the defense can really just start to go after the quarterback, or in this case, stack the box, force Tony DeVito to beat you. It's going to be really, really interesting on that side. But I am going to just take one moment. I don't think anything on your end will change, but I'm just going to pause this podcast. So if it does start up a little awkwardly after this moment, you know why. All right. Sorry for that, but it does look like Raider Jim's technical issues may keep him a little longer. So you're stuck with me for the moment. We are going to continue on here. As again, that was the Giants at Dallas rundown. Huge line of 15.5. Washington is heading to Seattle. It's going to be an interesting one. The Seahawks are 6.5-point favorites. And the over-under sits at 46. This is a game, obviously, Washington looked pretty good last week. They got the job done against a Patriot team that now drops to, I believe, 2-7, one of the worst seasons under Bill Belichick, at least since I think his first year in 2000. But for Washington, I think they've seen glimpses and flashes of what we've seen out of, or what we will see out of this offense with Sam Howell. Obviously, they've kind of thrown in the towel a bit by essentially getting rid of their two edge rushers and Montez Sweat and Chase Young. So how much this team truly wants to win, that may be another question. However, I think Sam Howell and this offense is good enough to keep them in this game. Seattle did not look terribly good last week, and it's got to be a little tough going forward if you are in a division essentially that is dominated by a kind of a juggernaut in San Francisco. It almost feels like every game is a must win, especially after last week where that was not the case. So give me Washington. I'm going to buy a half a point because you know how I like to do things. Washington +7. In terms of the over-under, I have it at 46. I like the under here. I think this is more of a defensive battle. I think that's the best way for Washington to stay in this one. Offensively, probably more offensive weapons on Seattle's side of things. So if it does turn into a shootout, doesn't look good for the spread. But I think if we keep this, 24 to 20, might be, kind of the ceiling for what I'm looking for in this one. Maybe Seattle gets it done. Maybe it's Washington. Either way, the Commanders will cover, but I do like under 46 in the Washington at Seattle matchup. So moving on to a very important AFC North matchup. It's going to be the Cleveland Browns. They are heading to Baltimore. They will face the Ravens. The Ravens are 6-point favorites in this one. And the over-under sits at 37. Obviously, Baltimore looked like world beaters. I mean, they might have looked like the best team in all of football if you take out the records. And you just look at the sample size of what the Ravens have put together. I would not fault you for saying that the Ravens are the best team in the NFL. Might be the case. It is, only November, so not the end of the world for a lot of teams in the NFC North, or excuse me, the AFC North. But there's a jostling right now at the top of the AFC, kind of for that hierarchy with Baltimore, Cincinnati, and Kansas City. Kind of seems like Baltimore has taken Buffalo's place in that triple-headed hierarchy, but I do like Cleveland to come out and at least cover in this one. I am going to buy a half a point. So give me Cleveland +6.5. I do like the under in this one. I think the only way Cleveland can cover the 6.5, it has to stay under 37. This cannot turn into a shootout because Lamar Jackson and company will dominate that. I think for Cleveland defensively, they're going to be going up against one of the few teams in the NFL that, kind of prioritize running the football. And obviously, I don't want to say gimmicky ways, but let's just say different ways than the normal, drop back handoff or even, read options, things like that. Little tricks to get kind of almost an NFL version of the triple option, if you will, of what Baltimore likes to run. But I think this defense is on a historic pace, and I think it continues. And they do enough to keep this game close. I like Cleveland +6.5. And yeah, give me the under 37. This is 20 to 17 will give me a push. So maybe I'm looking closer to 17-14, maybe a scoreagami game of 18-15, something like that. But it's going to be interesting to see how this matchup shakes out. Obviously for Cleveland, I think if they have any hopes of winning the division, they're probably going to need to win this game right here. If only for the fact that even if it's not Baltimore, you're still going to have to keep up with Cincinnati more than likely, who I will be talking about here momentarily. So still just me, so apologies. It might be stuck with me for the rest of the pod, but moving on to a game that we kind of referenced earlier. I think we were talking about our week 9 thoughts, but it is the San Francisco 49ers. They're heading across country to face the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Niners are 3-point favorites in this one, and the over-under sits at 46 points. The Niners are on a 3-game losing streak, and they've also had their bye during that. So I brought up the looking to punch somebody analogy earlier with the Cowboys. Well, I think the Niners are looking to punch everybody at this point. They've been stewing on their 3-game losing streak. In that time, of course, I do think they did get better by bringing in Chase Young. I think that's a massive pickup for already one of the best defenses in the game. And also, I think we're talking about the health of Christian McCaffrey. He's relatively healthy. I'm knocking on wood as we speak. I don't want to, wish ill on anyone, even if they are a rival of my Eagles. But I think that is going into it. Obviously, we've saw what happens when Brock Purdy, it kind of all falls on him. I think this kid will get things figured out. At the very least, Kyle Shanahan will try and put him into better situations. I think the Niners do get the job done. I'm going to buy a 0.5 point. So give me the Niners minus 2.5. In terms of the over-under here, I think we're going to see some points being scored, even if it's mainly on San Francisco's side of things. But I think Jacksonville can maybe even get into the 17s, maybe into the 20s. So I see this as a 31-24, 31, even 31-17 will still get me home on that over-under. So I like the over 46 in Jacksonville. Very intriguing game. You want to talk about a measuring stick for the Jaguars? This is a massive measuring stick for them. If they can go out and somehow get a win over the Niners, they would be, jumping up all types of power rankings. And I think conversely, the Niners, it would be maybe time to fully panic if they aren't already. Obviously, a 3-game losing streak, you're not feeling great about that. But moving on to our second to last game, we'll be talking about, shouldn't say we, unfortunately, but it is the Houston Texans. They're heading to the AFC North to face the Cincinnati Bengals, a team we've talked about multiple times on this podcast already today. A team that's really kind of found their stride after stumbling out of the gates in big ways. The Bengals are 7-point favorites in this one, and the over-under sits at 48. Look, over-under sits at 7, so I'm going to buy a 0.5 point one way or another. In this case, I'm going to buy a 0.5 point to get it down to Cincinnati minus 6.5. It's going to be a battle either way. And as great as CJ Stroud looked, I don't think it continues here. Cincinnati, a little bit of a different animal. Cincinnati's a team that might not jump out to you defensively like crazy. But I do think that we are going to see Cincinnati hold Houston, or at least CJ Stroud, to, let's just say, bring him back down to earth. Maybe even, force a turnover or two. And like I said, maybe cool the CJ Stroud talk. He's probably going to win Offensive Rookie of the Year regardless. But I think Cincinnati does enough. The 6.5 point spread does scare me a bit. I'm always afraid of like a backdoor cover. Cincinnati's up 2 touchdowns late. They play that prevent defense. And sure enough, Houston goes and scores kind of what is a meaningless touchdown in a, with 10 seconds left to get to 7. So let me buy a 0.5 point, get me Cincinnati minus 6.5. And then I do like the under 48 here. I think the number's a little bit too high for my liking. Like I said, the way I see this game kind of being handicapped, I think CJ Stroud and the Houston offense, like I said, they come down to earth. Cincinnati does what needs to be done, but we do stay under that 48. I could see this one being a, 24-20 type game, which wouldn't be great for the spread, but, excuse my math skills on the dot there, but I do think we stay under in this one. But moving on to the final game we'll be talking about here on this one, or on this podcast, I should say. This one, in terms of the game, is going to be held again for a second straight week in Germany. It is the Indianapolis Colts. They are 1.5-point favorites as they face the New England Patriots. Technically, the Patriots will be the home team in this one, but obviously that's not really the case when you're in Germany. But Colts 1.5-point favorites, over under sits at 43.5. Personally, in this one, I really like Indianapolis, the money line. The Patriots seem to be in a little bit of a disarray. I think the Belichick coach teams, when it works, it works. But sometimes that overbearing sense when you're winning is fine. When it's kind of that Belichick no fun attitude, no days off, and you're winning championships, or at the very least competing, winning division title and AFC title year after year after year, you can put up with that. But when you're 2-7, I think the overbearing Bill Belichick, I think it starts to wear on guys. And I think that's what we're starting to see here. And I think we see it continue. Indianapolis with Gardner Minshew, they're not going to win, Super Bowls with him. Probably not even going to make playoffs with him. But he's going to compete. He's kind of, a Josh Dobbs, same type of, fire and heart. Probably not on the same IQ level as Josh Dobbs. No offense to my man, Uncle Rico 2.0, who I have a ton of respect for. But once again, I'm literally holding him up to a rocket scientist. So probably not fair on his side, but I do think the Colts get the job done. I'll take the money line. You know me, anything under pretty much 2 points. I don't mess around with the spread. I don't want a 21-20 to come back and get me on that side of it. So just give me Indy money line. And I do see some points being scored here. I could see Gardner Minshew maybe throwing for 3 or 4 touchdown passes in Germany, loads up on some beers and brats in the week before. And one thing we saw last week with Kansas City and Miami, didn't really seem like the team that got there first. That didn't seem to matter. Obviously, the Dolphins were the team that got there, I think, 2 or 3 days before the Chiefs last week. Well, they didn't really get rolling until the second half. So I'm not really taking that into account, at least for this one. So give me the Colts money line and give me the over. Unfortunately, I did just get the text from Raider Jim. He will not be able to hop back in. He's going to take care of some technical issues. And he'll be back with me tomorrow for the Breeders' Cup wrap-up. And, of course, next week for Week 11. Goodness gracious, already Week 10, looking at Week 11, getting ready to eat our turkeys and then, of course, celebrate the holiday season. But, my final thoughts, the NFL, I just kind of alluded to it. It goes by so quick. It seems like it doesn't. And when you're in it, it's great. You're looking around, you're enjoying it. Next thing you know, it's the, week 18 and you're looking ahead to the playoffs and you're really excited about that. And then you realize, Super Bowl's right around the corner. So that's what we have. Enjoy this. Enjoy the football, even if you're not betting on it. And a lot of these games, some of these games feel like traps. The Giants could lose by 2 touchdowns and still cover. The Raiders, I don't know how they're underdogs after what we saw against the Jets. But just be careful. Some of these lines are kind of those trap door lines, but just make sure you bet safe, as Raider Jim always says, and bet smart, definitely. But with that being said, thank you all so much for listening to this episode of the NFL Weekly presented by the First Off the Bench Podcast Network. Everyone comes off the bench. We are first. It's time for y'all to go wash your hands and stop hating, everybody. We'll talk to you all very soon. Take care.